Hey guys, not feeling too well today, but I do want to talk to you about something that I get asked quite a bit, and that is simulators. What simulator do I use and what are the settings that I use for that particular simulator? So let's go ahead and talk about simulation in general. I don't want to spend hours on this topic. I just want to kind of give you my take on simulation, where it's come from and where it is now, based on, you know, should a beginner get into simulator or simulation first, or should they just buy a full-scale quad? Should they buy like one of these smaller drones? There are a lot of things to be said about simulation versus real-life flying, and I'll just go ahead and kind of break it down for you. So first, and just in no way, shape, or form am I being paid to talk about any of this. This is just me bringing up this stuff based on people asking me questions. So don't think that I'm sponsored by one of these simulators and they're paying me to talk about which one's better. This is a personal preference. I've tried all of them, whatever. So let's go ahead and talk about simulation as a whole. So simulation is something that we can use as humans to learn from something that we've experienced in real life and bringing it into a virtual world so that we can at least take experience and, you know, try to relate to something that may happen in real life. That way we've been in that scenario before and it's not as alien to us when we do happen to, if we ever happen to have that scenario in the real world, then we will have experienced something similar to it in a simulator. So that's really what simulation is used for, and also just time. Like, the more experience you have, the better you're going to be at the end of the day. So, you know, full-scale aviation, they do simulation all the time. They do it for stalls, they do it for failures, they do it for just experience in general, taking off, landing, just overall, you know, stick time. Now, with simulation on a mini quad, that's kind of the same thing. So like, yeah, you can fly stick time and get your muscle memory down. That's really what we're training here. We're training muscle memory with a simulator. We're training muscle memory when we go out and fly in real life. And to me personally, I think that there has always been a very large gap between how this quad felt on a simulator versus how a quad felt in real life, and there wasn't really a middle ground. Like, there wasn't a simulator that took that real world stuff and brought it together with that virtual world, and up until recently that was the case, but it's getting better. I'll just go ahead and say that. It's not 100% there, and I don't think it will ever be 100% there, but it's getting a lot closer. 4 or 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, when it was starting to become a thing, like FPV simulation, it was like 65% of a real quad. And it was just like, you know, it flew too perfectly, and then it didn't have the same weight and floating characteristics, and it just didn't feel the same. And then, you know, it got a little bit better, and the real quad started flying better, and then the simulators started just kind of maintaining that 65–70% feeling of a real quad. It never really got the same physics. So up until recently, that was a serious problem, but a lot of people have started to realize that this is a thing. Like, making these quads feel exactly like they do in real life is a huge deal, but also the quads in real life have been getting better and better, so it's kind of, you're chasing your tail the whole time. So, for example, we'll just say Liftoff and DRL. For example, I've tried both of these games. Both of them are hosted on Steam. They're both geared towards a video gaming audience. To me, those games are great for video gaming audiences. But again, you noticed I called them games. They do feel and play like a real quad to an extent, but it's a little bit harder to tune those aircraft to feel like a real quad. And even when you do, it's never really quite there. I would say both of those games are in the 85, maybe pushing into the 90% range. I would stay closer to 85% of a real quad feel. Now with Velocidrone, that seems to be the one that that's my go-to for some reason. I don't know why, it's just the one that I prefer. Maybe because I don't like Steam, and also maybe because I know that those guys are very adamant on making these things feel exactly like they do in real life, and the tests that they do, and also just how intuitive it is to tune and make it feel like a real quad. So if you'll notice, all of the guys on Velocidrone and Betaflight and even Liftoff, well, you know, Betaflight and Liftoff and Velocidrone, they all kind of work together in a sense that the tunings tuning aspect is very much just a Betaflight copy. So you have the PIDs and the rates and all that stuff are set up like they are on Betaflight, so that it's fairly, fairly regular. Like you can see it and you're like, oh, I know what that is. I know if I change this, it should do this. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a screen cap here and start up Velocidrone, and we'll just go over the settings kind of in my Velocidrone setup that I'm happy with, and I'll talk to you more about why I think Velocidrone is the go-to for like actual FPV. If you wanted to hone a skill, I would prefer telling you to go to Velocidrone than I would if you went to any of the other ones. Now, let's see here. We will go into whenever this loads. So we'll go into the single player setup, and I'll just say right now that there are a bunch of different models here, and I've tried a few of them and they all kind of didn't really feel that different, and some of them did and I wasn't happy with them. I'll just say right now my favorite is the little bastard, wherever the heck that thing, there it is, the little bastard. So a lot of the stuff is just geometry based, so one of them might have a different geometry so it flies a little bit different, one of them might have a little different weight factory so it'll fly a little different. This is the one that I've liked. It flies very much like an alien once you set it up like one. Now we'll go into here and you will see that I usually run 25 degrees in real life. I run the same amount on here. I run the field of view at like, I think 1.8, which is slightly different. 2.5 is my realistic field of view, but I'm basing it off of actual looks. So whether or not it says 1.5 or 2.8 or whatever the heck it says in the actual game, this looks more like the GoPro lens that I use in my real quad as far as field of view is concerned at 1.8 than it does at 2.5 millimeters. Now you'll go in here and you'll see that it has an advanced drone setup, and this is the thing I was talking about earlier where it's like Betaflight. So you have the PIDs and whatnot on the left, and then on the right you have the rates, and you have Expo on the far right, and then you have angle mode and all that stuff. So these rates, or sorry, these PIDs right here, they're PIDs in this game, and all games are fairly arbitrary. Like you put in a number and it does something, but it doesn't really do much. You don't really notice it. But just in general, these numbers right here seem to work really well with that particular quad to make it feel like an alien, which I know it's not exactly an alien, but it feels very much like my real quad, and that's the end goal for me. I want to make the quad on the simulator feel exactly like my real quad in real life. Now, a lot of people have trouble feeling that to make it happen for their particular real quad. So I'm not saying that you all need to have an alien or you all need to run these rates or whatever, but I'm just letting you know that if you want something that flies like the setup that I use, then I made this fly like the setup that I use. So that's how that's what I do. I have a formula. I stick to the formula because it works for me. It does everything I want it to do, and I don't know, I'm happy with it. I don't need to keep changing every week because it seems to work really well for me. And then the rates and stuff, obviously these are Betaflight rates. They're not exactly like KISS rates, and obviously this game is not exactly like real life, but I've seemed to have adjusted these rates to feel very much like my real life KISS setup. Now that's not all of it. All of these games have these settings, which are supposedly like your real world PIDs and rates, which make the quads feel a certain way, but how they interact with the actual environment as far as like gravity and drag and whatnot is something that is very, very difficult to make realistic. Now, obviously all of this stuff can be changed, but at the same time, what do you change and how do you know when to change it or what to change it to? So this is kind of where it's taken me a while to figure out how to change these numbers, and in every game it's different. Like I figured it out in the DRL, the one that wasn't on Steam first, and I was like, oh yeah, this feels kind of good, but it's not really there and I can't really adjust it anymore. So on this particular game, Velocidrone, you'll notice that the top three I've actually left the same, and the drags, they're 110%, and then it started to change as you go down here. So it's lift downforce is 115%, your pitch is 5 by 4.5, even though that's not what I fly in real life, that's what makes it feel like my quad in real life. And then the power, propeller power is 65%, min throttle's at 1060, weight of the quad is 148%, and I don't turn on battery emulation because I'm flying a video game, and I don't necessarily need to be able to tell you that, hey, my video game, the battery's dead, and I, don't need to do anything else. So let's just get out of that. I'll stop the screen recording and we will talk one last thing about why that particular game seems to work well for me, and other people will argue that, you know, maybe liftoff is a better simulator because it looks better, or because it has different physics, or maybe you can change a battery or something and it changes the output of how the quad flies. So for me personally, flying a simulator, I want it to be the most user-friendly experience as possible, whether or not it looks amazing or not. If I'm like, for instance, I know that Liftoff's aircraft look amazing. They look really good and you can customize them and all that shit. I'm not looking at the aircraft when I'm sitting inside of it, so I don't really care what it looks like. Now, if I was in a car and I was playing third person, like on GTA or something, or on a new Forza, then yeah, I want it to look cool. But for an FPV drone, if you're actually flying it to hone a skill, you're not really looking at it ever, because you're sitting inside of it and looking out of a camera. So with Liftoff in particular, for me it was difficult to tune because I had you had to change things specifically. Like, you had to change the kV of the motor, you had to change the motor size, you had to change the props, you had to change the prop size, you had to change the frame, you had to change all of these things, and there wasn't a way to just adjust gravity or to adjust drag or to adjust your pitch of your props in the game. You actually had to go out and change it in the menu and then go back and test it, and it's really difficult to A/B stuff when you're doing it that way, because you actually have time. You're going to change this and then go, oh, that feels a little better, but does it feel actually any different than what it did 5 minutes ago when you were talking about changing something? So it's a little convoluted in my mind, but you know, it's a very cool concept. But I don't agree with it for, you know, honing a skill and flying something as a simulator. And that's kind of where you have two sides to the thing. You have the simulation side and you have the video game side. If you want to play the video game side, I would say, you know, GTA 5, FPV simulator all day. If you want to play the simulation side, there's Velocidrone on its own out here, and then in the middle over here you have the DRLs and the liftoffs and whatnot, where they're trying to merge that gap. But for me, as a simulator, I guess critic, I guess you could call me, I still think Velocidrone takes the cake as far as the best simulator on the market. Now, if you want to argue with me on if it's not the best game, yeah, sure, whatever. It's not the best game. Does the online presence, does it have drift points? No, it doesn't. But it's a simulator. It does what it does, and it does it well. So yeah, I'm sure I'll have more videos on this particular content in the future, because my brain is working at like 52% right now. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below. If you guys want to hear anything from me, I'm going to be doing a lot of videos coming out in the next months or so. I mean, I'm trying to do 3 videos a week for you guys, and I want to do Fridays to where it's like an in-depth like talk about something. So if you have anything that you want me to talk about, please put it in the comment section below. Give me a thumbs up on this video if you liked it, and I really appreciate you guys watching my content, and I'm going to be pushing hard this year. So hopefully we can see some growth in this industry, as we have not seen it for a while. Drone industry is like pretty plateaued out. Let's get it going again. All right guys, thanks. I'm gonna die now.